As India aims to enhance its sustainable operations like renewable energy capacity, incorporating sustainable design practices from countries around the globe, what are some design techniques that are widely adopted in the UK and can be cost effective in the Indian context as well?
So, UK compared to India, UK's residential architecture is like immobile, like it doesn't move. So, what's in UK? No matter which year you have come to UK, even 10 years back or 10 years from now on, I'm pretty sure the buildings or the residences are going to look the exact same because they have this conservative mentality when it comes to their old buildings. So even the residential buildings that are like really old, they have these norms that don't allow the people to demolish these buildings. They are more focused on preserving these buildings because the style of architecture of a certain place, when it comes to the residential architecture, it's their own style and they don't want to change it. Whereas when we come to India, you move from one street to the other street. Even within the street, the house next door is like completely different. So the architects can do whatever they want. But here, residential architecture basically doesn't move much. The only thing that we can do when it comes to residential architecture here, for example, last year I worked trying to make a design guide for the residential buildings in Sunderland. So Sunderland is a city where you have two types of residential architecture. So one is Ashbrook, second is Sunderland cottage style. So those are the two styles of the residences that we find in Sunderland city. So depending on the cities that you come from, every city has their own traditional residential style. And all those buildings are supposed to be kept safe. They don't allow you to destroy it. And even within the buildings, you can make certain changes based on the deterioration. So renovation works can be done only to a certain point. So basically, it's like you're conserving the building even in the inside as well. There are certain things that you cannot change when it comes to, for example, a city council. If you get the drawing from of a certain residential building, even in the plan, they mention that when the time comes to renovate, you cannot touch these particular walls. You are not allowed to do anything to them. So there are certain things that they want to keep as is. The new construction that you see are usually like office buildings, student accommodations. Even student accommodations are like really well preserved. When I came here, I used to live in a building called Claude Gibb, and I'm pretty sure it was like 100 years old, 80 to 100 years old. And now they're trying to demolish it.
Yeah.
You know, every building has its own age. After that, you have to demolish it. New buildings coming up here in UK is very rare. It only happens in rare locations, not really building a house. You might be building a holiday home. In terms of that, architecture in UK is kind of different from architecture in India. We have lot of freedom to whatever we want, and there are like multiple loopholes architects and engineers abuse to be honest, to
Yes.
build structures in India. That's the difference that I find in these two different places.
Each one. Okay.
You don't have much freedom here when it comes to designing a house.
Designing.
Yeah, something that I find really different is the landscape architecture. You have a lot of potential for landscape architecture over here because no one's trying to preserve landscape architecture. You can actually play with it, given that you maintain a certain percentage of the greens, certain percentage of the hardscape, and stuff like that. It's just the buildings that have these strict norms.
That is something which is really interesting. Can you also highlight some innovative materials or let's say technologies that you have experienced in the UK and can be used in the Indian setting as well?
Right. So when it comes to architecture in terms of UK and India, Indian architecture is like very vibrant because no two areas have the same climate. So if you
Yes.
go to Kerala, from which is where I'm from, it's tropical climate and it rains all the time. It's extremely humid. So the traditional architecture over there, it's evolved based on the climate, right? In
Yes.
terms of UK, the entire UK almost has the same climate, except the north. When it comes to north, it snows much more heavier and it's much more colder. It
Okay.
rains even more. They have almost the same kind of architecture throughout. If it comes to the building materials, in UK, residential architecture generally uses, bricks, cladding, roofing material that you find here.
Mhm.
It's just that the way they use it is a bit different. You don't find people painting their houses much over here. It's usually exposed. Exposed in the sense that it's not even the actual brick that is exposed. They have brick cladding over the brick. It's a very uniform looking architecture when you look from afar. And also something different that I find in the style of architecture is that some of these buildings, they have the roof. the way it slopes is such that the snow or the rain doesn't really stick onto it. So all these houses have like sloping roof. None of them have a flat roof. Also, the cladding material, choice of cladding material. For example, if it's a two-story house, so we have ground G+1. The ground floor will have brick cladding, but the first floor walls, they will have the same cladding as the roof material. It's placed in certain way that the rain doesn't actually stick onto the walls, so that you can prevent algae formations. Small smart things that they have done. Something else that we see is that they don't have compound walls that like the ones that we have in India. The compound walls that we have in India sometimes are like much more luxurious than the house itself, which is inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny. If you look at UK architecture, what you
Mhm.
might find is like a small barricade made of plants. The vegetation itself becomes a small barrier. The surrounding of the houses, they are much more subtle and much more humble in nature when it comes to UK residential architecture. But when it comes to Indian residential architecture, the character of the building, the character of the residence is just
Boundary.
after image of the character of the owner of the house. Sometimes the walls are like huge, humongous walls. The house inside is very small. Sometimes the house is really huge, and the walls, compound walls, also are also really huge. Sometimes the house looks like prison from outside. It depends on the nature of the owner or the architect of the building when it comes to Indian residential architecture, which is completely different from what we have in here. So the houses look like home. It's much more humble. It's much more in with the nature. It
Mhm.
doesn't try to stand out. It just attempts to stick in. It doesn't try to be loud. It's very humble in nature. Most of the houses that we have over here, they don't go beyond the height of the trees that are around it. It's really humble. The You get sunlight. UK, you don't find much sunlight. So because we have this kind of architecture, height of the building is standardized, the number of floors are standardized. Even if we get a little bit of sunlight, we can make most of it. If we don't have these norms in UK, what's going to happen is people are going to build like multiple story houses here and there. They have different styles, just like we have in India. But
Yeah.
if we do that here, what's going to happen is if you have a smaller house, which is in between two huge houses, you don't get any sunlight, suitable for the climate over here. And what we
Mhm.
have in India is like suitable for the climate over there. In India, I would like to see more traditional architecture based on the state you are in, because some of the architecture that we see rising up in India, they are like completely opposite to the climatic context. The buildings and the residents of the buildings, they're going to face problems in time because the climate is totally against the design itself. If you're going to have a flat roof without any kind of treatment
Mhm.
done on the terrace, when the rain pours down, you're going to have leaking on the walls, you're going to
Yeah.
have damp ceiling. So you are actually doing a design that is totally opposite to the
Yeah.
climate you are from. That's the problem. So I would like to see much more climate oriented designs in India.